You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Thursday, October 18th. It is also the feast day of St. Luke the Evangelist. This week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we have been exploring what it means to be Jesus Christ's follower. On Monday, we looked at the example of St. Teresa of Avila and how we learn from her that in order to follow Jesus, we need to do his work. On Tuesday, we looked at St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, who received visions of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And from her, we learned that in order to be Jesus' follower, we need to accept his love and in return, offer him all of our love. Yesterday, with the help of St. Ignatius of Antioch, we learned that in order to follow Jesus, we need to be willing to give him everything, even if, as in the case of St. Ignatius, it requires our life. And today, with the help of St. Luke the Evangelist, we will learn that in order to be a follower of Jesus, we need to talk about him, to tell people about him, and to spread his holy message. Now, St. Luke the Evangelist. We call him an evangelist because he was one of 4 people that wrote the Gospels. There were 4, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now, a couple of the people that wrote the Gospel were disciples of Jesus. They knew him when he was alive, and they followed him. They were one of his chosen apostles. St. Luke was not one of those people. In fact, tradition tells us that Luke was a Greek, meaning he was not Jewish, he was a foreigner, and therefore probably wouldn't have been very well accepted by the Jews. So he was Greek, and he was also a physician, which means he was a doctor. Being a doctor, of course, in the time of Jesus was different than it is now. They didn't have modern hospitals, and yet he worked hard to take care of people and ministered to many of the early apostles when they went on their way to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. Now, St. Luke did not only write the Gospel of Luke, he is also given credit for writing the Acts of the Apostles. The Acts of the Apostles is a book that chronicles what Peter and other apostles did after Jesus' death to spread the gospel throughout the entire region. It also shares how many of those brave preachers lost their lives in an effort to spread the good news about Jesus Christ. Luke was also mentioned in the letters of St. Paul. He references Luke as a companion, as someone that was there with him as he was going around preaching, and was even with Paul when Paul was arrested and later executed in Rome. So what does this all teach us about what it means to be a follower of Jesus? Well, now Luke, he wrote the Gospel and he wrote the Acts of the Apostles quite a while after Jesus died. He wrote it after he had seen the martyrdom of his friends, after he had been treated poorly simply because he loved Jesus, and yet he persevered in his faith, and he did everything that he could to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. It is doubtless that he preached when he spoke about Jesus often, but he also wrote the stories down so that we have these beautiful stories about Jesus. In fact, Luke's gospel is the only one with certain details that happened before Jesus' birth. It is a tremendous gift that he has given us that he wrote down these stories about Jesus Christ. And so, Sprouts, I have a challenge for you today. Yes, you probably won't be writing a gospel to be added to the Bible. However, you can be like St. Luke. You can boldly tell people about Jesus. And I know how scary that is. It's so scary. In fact, it oftentimes feels like talking about Jesus is the scariest or the strangest thing that we could ever do. And yet, St. Luke, St. Paul, all the people that preached about Jesus in that time were willing to give their lives in order to spread his message. Are we willing to do that? So, Sprouts, here is the challenge. I want you to find an opportunity where you can mention Jesus. Maybe it's with a friend. Maybe it's with a younger sibling. It doesn't have to be a dangerous situation, and please stay safe. But just think, where can I talk about Jesus in a safe way, in a beautiful way, and continue to share his message? That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God intended you to be. And finally, Sprouts, today's episode of the Catholic Sprouts podcast was sponsored by a generous listener who doesn't want any recognition, but simply wants to use this time to remind you to always, always trust in the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of our beloved Mother Mary.